Good evening. My name is Dana Trevethan, Superintendent for Turlock Unified, and thank you for joining us this evening for our virtual community forum that will highlight our reopening efforts as well as an opportunity to collect input from you following this presentation. As most of you know, we've already presented some preliminary information to our school board last Tuesday in the hopes that the positivity rate will continue to decrease and we might be able to bring students, elementary students, back in some capacity. This evening we have a great deal of information to share with you that I think will bring you both confidence and information in knowing our best intentions and efforts at this time to return students safely and staff safely to schools when deemed possible. So at this time, I'd like to hand it over to my Assistant Superintendent of Educational Services, Heidi Lawler, who's been leading this charge with our Chief Communication Coordinator, Marie Russell. Thank you, Heidi.
Thank you, Dana. Good evening, parents, staff, and community members. Thank you for joining us. Tonight I'll be providing information on the work completed on TUSD's draft TK-6 reopening plan and waiver application. These are documents. However, this is really much more of a process, and I'd like to provide a little bit of background before the presentation itself. Turlock Unified is proceeding with optimism and caution as we work to return students to in-person learning when safe to do so. We recognize that to bring students back to in-person learning at any time is going to require changes to our school procedures, health and safety practices, and configurations during classroom instruction, recess and PE, lunchtime, and arrival and dismissal. To prepare for the return of students, we must begin planning now. As I said, this is a process which includes review of regulations, guidance, and documents from national, state, and local agencies. And this process also requires that we follow the guidance of our local public health official. This process requires that we consult with parents, staff, including labor leadership, and community members. We're in the middle of that process and have invited individuals from some of the many community organizations and groups that support our schools as well. They include representation from City of Turlock, CSUS, community partners Jessica's House, Westside Ministries, and Legacy Health Endowment. Stanislaus County Public Health also reviewed our draft plan and made suggestions for revisions. The draft plan, waiver application, and presentation have been revised to reflect this input that we've received at this point. All input is reviewed and is highly valued. Some suggestions from staff are reflected directly in the updated plan. Others come from a multiple of voices from staff, parents, and the community who share similar perspectives, while other recommendations may be considered for the future or specific situations. This process is not unique to this time. It is reflective of the foundational belief that decisions cannot be made in isolation. Our collective wisdom benefits those who we serve, our students. Finally, but most importantly, we know that families are struggling at this time. Many are incredibly hopeful for students to return to school immediately. Many have grave concerns that at any time prior to January is too soon. We will do everything possible to best meet the needs of the majority of families and evaluate the distance learning model to offer for those who are not comfortable returning to campuses once in-person learning does return. In considering the district's ability to function with multiple instructional models, we have reached the decision that we won't be able to offer distance learning and hybrid learning and the blended model simultaneously. Again, we'll do everything possible to meet family needs within our means. And with that, I'd like to present TUSD Safe Schools Reopening Plan and Waiver Application. All right, starting out, there's some data that we'd like to share with you regarding COVID-19 and how it's being looked at from the state and local level. With the new California tier framework, there are 4 different tiers: purple, red, orange, and yellow. Purple being that with the highest number of COVID cases and the highest positivity rate. Stanislaus County currently is at purple. Schools in the purple tier are not permitted to reopen for in-person instruction unless they receive a waiver from the public health for TK-6 grades. Schools can reopen for in-person instruction once their county has been in the red tier for at least 2 weeks. However, upon returning, there must be a plan in place to ensure the safety and health of our students and staff. In considering next steps, one of the things that has been thought about a great deal is what would happen after Labor Day. Following Memorial Day, following 4th of July, and other holidays, we did see spikes. However, currently the numbers are not increasing as one might have expected with Labor Day. Those numbers are still being monitored to see if our numbers continue to stay low. Additional data is provided by the state of California with more specificity. And within this data, you can see the number of cases over time. And also one area that's especially crucial for Stanislaus County is looking at our Latino population, knowing that the Latino population, both in our county, in the state, and across the country, has seen more COVID cases than those in those of other ethnicities. So at this point, Stanislaus County, again, we're in that tier for widespread. Our current case rate is 9.4 cases per 100,000. So that is more than the 7 daily new cases allowed to move into the red tier. Additionally, our positivity rate's at 5.6%, and that is less than the 8% positivity rate. For the California Department of Public Health or CDPH TK-6 waiver process, there are a number of steps that we need to go through, as well as specific topics that are addressed. And so those steps include going through a waiver process that applies only to TK-6, that we would complete a district application for TK-6, submit that 14 days prior to reopening, consult, as I shared earlier, and then publish the draft and the plan on the website. And as you can see, there are a list of specific topics that are addressed that I'll talk more in detail about as we go through the presentation. In looking at the public health waiver review, there are a number of components that are also considered regarding the health and safety of our students and staff. That includes using the available scientific evidence, state law, whether instruction can be provided in stable cohorts, local guidance and resources, and available personal protective equipment or PPE, current guidance and positivity rate and indicators associated with the county monitoring list, hospital trends and capacity, available testing resources, and then the extent of consultation with our stakeholders. Looking at the process, there are 3 primary areas, and the first one is prevention, and this is in accordance with the public health agencies. The number 1 aspect to consider with the waiver is physical distancing, how space and routines will be arranged to allow for physical distancing for students and staff within the classroom and around the campus. Highlights from our waiver include the procedures that are instituted by schools to minimize mixing of cohorts, the arrival and departure, bathroom and meal service, and then ensuring that we have that 6-foot physical barrier. And we're already working with principals to develop those plans to ensure that we are set to move forward with that once we are deemed safe to reopen. Also posting signs to demonstrate that we will, as reminders about that 6 feet. Next, entrance, egress, and movement within the school. Knowing that a school campus is a very busy place, that the movement of students and staff and parents will be managed to avoid that close contact and mixing of cohorts. Highlights from our plan include that each school principal is working to implement these procedures to provide this, and not only the 6 feet distancing, but also the entering, exiting, and moving throughout the school day. To the greatest extent possible, students will be spaced apart on buses, and masks will be required for grades 3rd through 6, and strongly encouraged for younger grades. Number 3, we have small, stable cohorts. And on the waiver, the focus there is how students will be kept in small, stable groups with fixed membership that stay together for all activities. That includes instruction, lunch, and recess. And to minimize and avoid contact with other groups and individuals who are not part of the cohort. And in looking at this process and this concept that was developed by public health, knowing that our students at the elementary school level, at the lower elementary, there are challenges with those students. And the challenge is to limit close contact, partially due to their maturity. Also, it's more feasible, though, in our elementary schools to maintain those stable cohorts. Knowing that we can, by reducing the number of students in school during the course of the day, we can maintain those with their classroom teachers. Also, the greater need for in-person and group-based instruction with close contact for social, emotional support, and academic development. For our high school students, although there are more of them on our campuses, it is more feasible to limit close contact and for them to be asked to wear face coverings. And it's more difficult, though, to maintain those stable cohorts due to the numbers and the makeup of our schools. As a reminder, early on we developed 4 learning models, and currently we're in the distance learning model with hybrid learning model for some of our students. Upon returning, we would move to the blended learning model. With this, students would attend school in person 2 days, they would be learning from home 2 days, and then they would have the typical distance learning, which we're currently implementing on Wednesdays on that day of the week. So to look at a simplified model of this, you can see that we have group A and group B, and then for group A, they're in person on Monday and Thursday. On Tuesday and Friday, they are having at-home independent learning, where they have a check-in with the teacher early in the day, but then primarily they're doing independent practice from the Monday and Thursday instruction that they had. And the same would be true of those who attend on Tuesday and Friday. On Wednesday, all students will have distance learning as is currently scheduled. And we do know that there are some challenges with blended learning for families, for parents, but we believe that this is the model that we can most effectively and most safely bring students back, because we would have 50% of students in school at one time and be able to implement that social distancing without difficulty, and also to share that for the blended learning model and any of these models. We are looking forward to the day when we're able to return to full instruction in a normal setting, and once the COVID-19 is no longer a concern. With regard to our looking at those small stable cohorts, highlights include that we will maintain those throughout the day. Recess will be held in separate areas for different classes and will be staggered. We also are going to work to avoid sharing of equipment, and students will remain with their cohort during lunch with individually plated or bagged meals, and they will not during blended learning mix with other cohorts. Number 4 in the waiver plan and process is healthy hygiene practices. The availability of hand washing stations and hand sanitizer, and how their use will be promoted and incorporated into routines. And we certainly have heard from many parents and teachers and others that, you know, children at this point have become very adept at hand washing, and that's something that most of them, it's part of their normal routine. We need to ensure that happens at school as well. Our classrooms have been equipped with hand sanitizers, and they also have a sink. Schools will implement routines for frequent hand sanitation based on COVID-19 prevention measures. And then we'll also provide video and print resources for training our students on hand washing and other hygiene practices. Number 5, face coverings and other essential protective gear, which also is crucial to our ability to reopen and to maintain health and safety within our schools. And so all students in grades 3 through 6 will utilize face coverings as indicated by recommendations for the Center for Disease Control and CDPH. And while face coverings are strongly encouraged for young students between 2 years old and 2nd grade, they can be worn properly. And feedback that we're hearing again is that many students are becoming accustomed to this, and we will hope that they are able to, and we will plan and strongly encourage students at those levels to wear them. However, if there is a student who is unable to and they meet the CDPH guidelines for exemptions, they will be provided reasonable accommodations. In order to receive those accommodations, a student would have to have a letter from a doctor stating that they're unable to wear them. We also will be flexible with the use of face shields when appropriate to help those students. But our students in grades 3rd through 6th will be expected to wear face coverings at all times that they're in the classroom. Cleaning and disinfection. How shared surfaces will regularly be cleaned and disinfected, and how the use of shared items will be minimized. Currently, our school staff, our custodial staff has already moved forward with using appropriate tools, cleaning products, equipment, and training to ensure that they're disinfecting schools and district facilities. That has been in place for many months now. It's a regular part of our routine. Staff at each school will continue to clean and disinfect those high-touch areas throughout the day. We've also developed a new position, a short-term sanitation helper, to help with that disinfection around campuses. And to the greatest extent possible, each student's belongings will either be, they'll be kept separated or they'll be discouraged from being brought to school. We won't have any items which are unnecessary in class each day. Students will be issued their own supplies. They've already received those which have been sent home during distance learning. There will be a set of supplies issued for their in-class learning as well. And the students will not share food or drink. Next, staff training and family education. How staff will be trained and families will be educated on the application and enforcement of the plan. Training and education is an essential part of the plan from the CDPH, and the district is working to develop those opportunities to share information with students and staff and parents in a variety of different formats, including both video in virtual and also through hard copy materials. The training of all staff will focus on enhanced sanitation practices, physical distancing and its importance, the proper use, removal, and washing of face coverings, screening practices, information regarding how COVID-19 is spread, and then also specific symptom identification. Highlights from our plan include regarding training, ensuring that all staff have information on the prevention of the spread of COVID-19 when sick, including the importance of not coming to work if someone is ill, if they have symptoms, or if they live with someone who's been diagnosed. But regarding COVID-19, to seek symptom identification and when to seek medical attention. Plan and procedures to follow when children or adults become sick at school, and then plan and procedures to protect workers from COVID-19 illness. The next section of the plan has to do with monitoring. And first in that area is health screenings for students and staff, how students and staff will be screened for symptoms of COVID-19 and how ill students or staff will be separated from others and sent home immediately. Currently with staff, we already are completing a TUSD COVID-19 self-screening log on a daily basis. And any staff who have a temperature over 100.4 degrees Fahrenheit would be sent home as they're logging information for their COVID and logging that information with the COVID-19 liaison. Staff members who have those symptoms would be asked to return home. For our students, daily home screening of all students for COVID-19 symptoms, utilizing the daily checklist for families. Touchless thermometers will be utilized to take temperatures as needed, and students who have a temperature that exceeds 100.4 degrees will go to an isolation room or area at the school site until they can be picked up by a family member. Next, the identification of tracing of contacts. According to the waiver, we must demonstrate actions that staff will take when there's a confirmed case. Confirm that the schools have designated staff persons to support contact tracing, such as creation and submission of a list of exposed students and staff to local health department and notification of exposed persons. Each school must designate a person for the local health department to contact about COVID-19. Highlights from our plan include identification. If a student or staff member tests positive for COVID-19, that student or staff member will be sent home if not already quarantined. They will be instructed to isolate for 14 days after symptom onset or 10 days after resolution of the symptoms, whichever is longer. If that person is never symptomatic, they will be isolated for 14 days after a positive test. School-based close contacts identified and instructed to test and quarantine for 14 days. With regard to tracing, each site will designate a COVID-19 liaison to act as the communication point for all COVID-19 concerns. And all of that information will be sent with the COVID-19 administrator at the district office to ensure that we're following practices district-wide. Next, testing of students and staff. According to the waiver, how school officials will ensure that students and staff who have symptoms of COVID-19 or have been exposed to someone with COVID-19 will be rapidly tested and what instructions they will be given while waiting for test results. And we'll describe how staff will be tested periodically to detect asymptomatic infections. Highlights from our plan include to advise students and staff to get tested as soon as possible after they develop one or more of the COVID-19 symptoms, or if one of their household members or non-household close contacts test positive for COVID-19. participate in staff testing under the county-wide testing initiative being coordinated by the Stanislaus County Office of Education, and with the CDPH recommendation that all staff surveillance test every 2 months. Next is triggers for switching to distance learning. The criteria the superintendent will use to determine when to physically close the school and prohibit in-person instruction. And that would include classroom closure, school closure, and district closure. And so based on our plan, a class will be closed when, with public health, we would consider closing if one or more students or staff members is confirmed to have COVID-19. When to close a school, again with public health, consider closing if multiple cohorts or classes have confirmed cases, or 5% of all students, staff have confirmed cases. And finally, when to close a district, when 25% or more of schools in a district have closed due to COVID-19. Throughout all of this process, we'll be working very closely with public health, who is an advisor and provides all recommendations regarding the health and safety of staff and students regarding COVID-19. Schools will be able to open typically after 14 days, and the following have occurred: cleaning and disinfection, a public health investigation, and consultation with local public health department, all to ensure that the school is ready to reopen. Number 12, communication plans for cases and exposures at school. How the superintendent will communicate with students, staff, and parents about cases and exposures at the school and maintain privacy requirements included in FERPA and HIPAA. District site and district administration will communicate with students, staff, and parents about cases and exposures at the school consistent with those privacy requirements. And measures to take when a student or staff member has symptoms is outlined in specific documentation to ensure that in any different scenario, the administrator and staff have clear communication on what steps to take next. Number 13, consultation. Confirm consultation with labor organization, parent, and community organizations. And as we shared, this is a valuable part of the work that we are doing with our community. And we appreciate the input from our staff members, from our parents, and also from the community. Currently, and we'll talk about this in just a minute, but we have an additional set of surveys, and we've been collecting input from that as well. This timeline indicates the different actions that have taken place to date, and beginning in September, you can see the dates here. However, this work began well before September. Throughout the summer, we were collecting information, following all of the case information. We were gathering scientific information from the California Department of Public Health and other health agencies to ensure that we were able to make effective decisions during this time. But starting in September, we began with bargaining unit consultation and went through a series of actions, including this evening's virtual reopening forum. And following this, we will continue to take survey input, and then we'll move forward with sharing with our Board of Trustees as an information and potential action item on October 6th. And then we'll consider, based on the board recommendation, submitting that TK-6 waiver, with the reminder that to move forward from that waiver, there must be a 14-day time frame before when we would expect to open. And again, all of this will be dependent upon our Board of Trustees, as well as the public health and their recommendations, and considering to monitor the cases in the county and in Turlock. Additionally, we'll work with ongoing staff and parent education and support, and then begin that staggered TK-6 opening, with the plan that as we are ready to reopen and we have that approval to do so in a safe manner, that we would begin with TK through second students, and then those students would attend school in person and learning at home through the blended learning model for 2 weeks. And then we would work to bring back our third and fourth graders, have that same time frame and that same process, and then bring back fifth and sixth graders. Additionally, we're working with the Head Start and state preschool on bringing back early childhood, and they have some different requirements, and so we need to ensure that we are following those that are put forth by the federal government regarding the Head Start program, as well as state preschool. And so we also have, as I shared, our survey, which is available for you. It's at the website. We're happy to have community members and parents and staff give us that feedback. Every one of the comments is read and reviewed and documented as we use that feedback to help us make decisions and help to adjust our plan and our waiver documentation and application. Additionally, just to mention that we have paper copies available at school sites for those who are unable to access through the internet, and our school principals have called families to let them know that those are available to them. We want to be sure that we make the opportunity to provide feedback available to everyone in our school community. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions that we may have as a result of the presentation. And Marjorie Betancourt is going to help me with that part.
Okay, let's start with some scheduling questions. Can you explain why we didn't go with a Monday, Tuesday, and then clean, and then a Thursday, Friday cohort, and why we went with a Monday, Thursday instead?
Yes, as we were working with staff and determining what would be the best schedule, that was an option that was presented, as well as some other options, and it was determined that for students to be out of school for nearly a week was not going to be as effective as having that staggered schedule with them being able to return during the course of 1 week. So educationally, instructionally, it was determined that would be the most effective way, and that we knew that we were including additional staff to help with that disinfection and cleaning, and that would happen after school each day.
Can you explain how the students will be divided into whether they attend on Monday, Thursday, or Tuesday, Friday?
We're going to use a process to make those decisions on the cohorts, starting with families. Our first layer to review will be families who have students at multiple school sites. Then we will look at siblings at the same school site, and then individual students would be then randomly assigned to Monday, Thursday, or Tuesday, Friday, to create a balance between those classes. And if there are any extenuating circumstances, principals will take those into consideration as well.
Will the staggering of our schedule still occur if we move into the red category?
At this point, we anticipate that we will need to have some approach to returning to school in a safe manner, which would include physical distancing, even if we're in that red. So yes, we would continue in that manner, and we'll continue to monitor guidance from the state and local public health to determine when it would be possible to return to have all students present in class. And I should say that at this time, we haven't heard any information that indicates with public schools that would happen in the immediate future. Everybody is looking to some sort of a blended type of a model, or that model with physical distancing having only 50% of students present.
Could you maybe clarify a little bit more that if school is open, what models would be available? Some people are still asking if they can stay on hybrid, if they can stay on distance learning. So maybe explain a little further.
Yeah, we know that for some families, the blended model is what they're ready for. They want to get back to school. We know that for others, distance learning has worked out quite well, and their students are thriving under distance learning. And for others, the hybrid really is the best option for them. We have determined that we cannot continue to offer all three of those models once in-person learning returns. So we are, as part of our survey process, we're getting some initial data on that now. Once we are ready to move forward, we will ask parents to commit and share which of those models is most effective for them, and we'll make a decision based on parent feedback and then also staffing. Our goal is to meet the needs of the majority of our parents.
Would the blended model have less teacher interaction than the current distance learning model?
No, the blended model will have more we'll have more teacher interaction. And it may be difficult to determine that when we get the schedules out, or when you look at the schedule that is on the sample schedule that's in the presentation. However, in looking at and calculating the number of minutes, there will be an increase in the amount of time that students are with teachers, whether it's that learning, the distance learning piece where they are learning at home through the computer, and the combination of that with in-person will be greater than the current distance learning.
Can you explain why we start to reopen with K-6 versus high school?
From the very beginning of this process, that has been the direction that's come from the state. And really, if you look at it, that the philosophy is that children who are in the younger grades, the younger students, that for them to learn through distance learning is more of a challenge than for our high school and junior high school students. I know that we all know that there are some students who are at the junior high and high school level who would be much better served with in-person learning, and we hope to get them back when it's determined safe to do so, but the state absolutely has prioritized the TK-6 students.
How would teachers do both blended and distance learning at the same time?
So for teachers with that blended model schedule, teachers will likely teach during the day. And when the students are at home, they will be provided assignments for working independently from the teacher, that they will have independent practice based on the day's previous learning, and they'll have access to a number of digital platforms that we have in the district. All students will have a daily check-in, which is required by the state regulations for at least a minimum of 15 minutes per day. But during those days when students are not present in school, that cohort, they would be working independently for the majority of the day. On Wednesdays, all students will be at home, and so the teacher would provide that distance learning instruction as he or she is doing currently.
There seems to be a lot of concern of how lunch would work on this on-site things. Can you explain a little bit more about that?
Yes, so lunchtime we know is a busy time of day at our elementary school campuses. And so if we consider first and foremost that we have 50% of the students present, so that will help us. The lunches on many sites are already staggered, and so we'll maximize that use of time in staggering further if necessary. And then we also will use other spaces such as the outdoors, which, as we know, is one of the most highly recommended places during all of this for individuals to spend time. And so if possible to have students, when the weather permits, to have lunch both indoors in the cafeteria and outdoors, but making sure that we're spreading out and that physical distancing is occurring on their campuses during lunchtime.
And would we be doing physical fitness during our in-person?
Yes, we do expect that there will be breaks, recess, physical education. Again, that's something I think that students have really missed, that opportunity, to be with their class and participate in those activities. It will look different though. There are programs that are out there that have been made, created by different physical education instructors that are specific to physical distancing and with using minimal amount of equipment. So to engage students in fun physical activity during the course of the day under supervision of teachers or other staff members.
Could you explain a little bit about the personal protective equipment or the safety protocols that have been put in place for the students to return on campus?
So if we look at it from two different perspectives, first of all, from the staff perspective, as far as what's going on the campuses now, there have been a number of safety protocols put into place in both at our school sites and our offices. That includes frequent sanitation or wiping down of surfaces. We all are wearing masks when we are in the presence of others. Those of us who may have a working space where we are not in contact with someone during the course of the day, we may not be wearing a mask. We have closed our break rooms in order to discourage that close contact and continue to remind staff of the importance of physical distancing, hand washing, and that and reducing close contact. as well as wearing their facial coverings or PPE. And then also want to say that the screening on a daily basis is occurring for staff too, as I mentioned before. With regard to students, when students arrive on campus, the principals are developing plans that will reduce the number of students arriving at any certain entrance. And so those will be very specifically communicated to parents, and so they will know on which part of the campus their student will be arriving to be dropped off. And so they will come in a manner, and we'll have staff there to guide to ensure that physical distancing is occurring during that time. In the classroom, again, those classrooms have been disinfected on a regular basis. We also are working with our staff to increase the number of times that restrooms are disinfected. We have turned off our drinking fountains, and so students will need to either bring bottled water to school, or they will need to be provided with bottled water. We also have bottle filling stations on campus. Again, we did not think that the drinking fountains were safe, and neither did the state of California. We also will work with students to limit the contact with different materials, and so they will use only their own materials in their own workspace and not be sharing those materials. That will be true both inside and outside. And with anything with regard to breaks, lunches, times when classes go to restroom, those times will all be scheduled and staggered so that cohorts are not mixing during the course of the day. And at the end of the day, as with arrival, the dismissal will be carefully planned for that 50% of students who are on campus during that time, so that they're able to exit in a manner that is safe.
So, excuse me, I'm gonna, before you summarize the next one, one of the questions that I'm seeing repeatedly, and I thought Heidi had answered it, and I think she did, but it might not have given enough clarity. So I'm seeing a great deal of concern about students being forced to return. So know this, we will create an opportunity for in-person instruction in that blended model, but no student or family will be forced to return to that model if they're not comfortable in doing so. The other question I'm seeing repeated is how do we know what the virtual model will be that will also be offered? And right now we don't know that. We know that we can choose between the distance learning model that we currently have as well as the hybrid model. We will be conducting a parent survey and actually a commitment. So not knowing what you think, but what you actually will commit to. One of the things that we learned is we can't possibly accommodate every single family. It's impossible to think that we could be running 3 formats simultaneously at this point, but you never know once numbers come in, and if the stars line up, and it's possible, of offering one cohort of hybrids. So we will be asking parents and families to make a commitment, and that will be the in-person, it will be the distance learning model, and it will be the hybrid. And then we will go from there and plan accordingly. But we do know this, it's in the students' best interest for their well-being. I see a lot of questions here being asked in terms of, is there a benefit of returning students to in-person instruction? Does that outweigh the risks? Will there be physical exercise? Our goal is that the amount of time that they are present on campus with teachers who care deeply about them, it will mirror as close as a regular day with social distancing practices. So yes, that would include recess, and yes, that would include physical exercise, but would it look like it looked before? Probably not. We'll do our best to ensure that students are not close, but we know they need fresh air. We know they need physical exercise. We know they need human contact, but that contact has to remain safe. So for those feeling like you need to start planning that your children will have to return, no one will have to return. We're doing what's best for our students and our families, and we understand that everyone's needs are different. So I'm hoping I'm answering several questions that are on this Q&A. Thanks, Margie.
When they come back to the blended model on site, will the in-person learning be full days?
Yes, when they come back, the in-person learning will be full days.
And will all of the desks be 6 feet apart, and who will monitor the social distancing guidelines?
So, as you saw in the graph as part of the presentation that came from the state of California, everyone recognizes that social distancing, young children, there will be some challenges around that. Please do remember that when we are wearing masks and we are in the presence of others, then those social distancing, those 6 feet, there is some flexibility on that. So the masks provide a great deal of protection, and all the data shows that. And so desks will be arranged so that there is as much distance as possible, that students will face in the same direction, all facing front. And then again, that expectation for grades 3 through 6 that they are wearing face masks, and for K2, TK2, that they're strongly encouraged. And we are seeing, with more and more young children, that they are able to wear those masks and get through the day. Again, we've talked to principals about finding time during the school day. If students are able to go outside, either for learning or for physical education, that they would be able to spread further than that 6 feet apart, and they would be all right to do that without masks, because we know that to wear the masks all day long will be a challenge for students. And so we'll try to find those times during the day. And as a former elementary school teacher, I remember some of my best lessons were those days when you take students outside and you spread out on the grass or under the trees and read a book and have a discussion, and students enjoy learning in that environment. And it's a very positive one at this time in particular.
Will all the programs be offered in the blended model? For example, GATE, dual immersion, and anything special ed?
Yes, all of our TUSD programs would continue to be offered, those programs that are a part of the school district. And so our GATE teachers will have GATE students who are enrolled. All of our special ed programs will continue with distance learning, at the blended model, knowing that there may need to be some adjustments to IEPs. We've already made adjustments during distance learning, but we have many families who have students on IEPs who have a real interest in getting their children back to school, and so we'd like to do that. Additionally, the dual immersion program would continue with blended model as well. And I should share that we recognize there are also some questions about after school programs, and that we'll be happy when we're able to have after school programs. Once again, one of the concerns right now is that if we were to have after school, we wouldn't be able to do so with maintaining those small stable cohorts. And additionally, we have to be sure that we're such a great partner with us, that they're able to make that happen as well. So it's likely that we wouldn't see after school for some time, either play or ACEs, but as soon as we're ready and as soon as the city is ready, we would be happy to have those programs once again.
Could you maybe reiterate the dates of when all of this stuff will be taking place?
Okay, some of the dates we know, and we have those dates set. Many of these dates are dependent upon some other events happening after this meeting and as we move into October. So really, the only date that we have finalized at this point is the date that we'll be coming back to the board to present for information and potential action, the plan, which will be complete based on feedback, as well as our waiver application. And so that will happen on October 6th. And between now and October 6th, every single day we are monitoring and reviewing the data that's coming through regarding infections. We are also in contact on a regular basis with public health to determine whether or not it would be appropriate to submit that waiver. Any of the work that we do now is necessary to be able to open at some point, whether that is later in October or further out. We don't have the specific dates for that, unfortunately. We would love to, but we are subject to other information and the conditions in the community as well. I don't know if there's anything else you want to say on that.
But we're going to have to do some sort of hit the FAQ. Yeah, I don't know.
No, we have time. So I was just wondering if there's anything else you want to say about the timeline. Is there anything else that, okay. Any other questions that?
Can you tell us how many students would approximately be in a cohort for the Monday, Thursday, Tuesday, Friday, and how that gets divided?
So that would be at the TK-2, that would be up to 12 students in each cohort, and in the grades 3 through 6, that would be up to 16. And they'll be divided. We'll look at working with families to identify those who have students at multiple sites and schedule those students together on the same days. We will look at the school site for siblings and schedule those together. And then the remaining students, we would then divide evenly between the Monday, Thursday, and Tuesday, Friday.
And so for high school grades 9 through 12, is distance learning the only option until further notice?
At this point, yes, that would be true. And we'll continue to look at what's going on within the county and if there are any moves to bring students back to in-person learning or to have any other different options. But we believe that many of our students are doing well with that. If you have any questions or concerns regarding distance learning for your high school student, please do reach out to your school site. We're also working to provide as many activities as we can for students at the secondary level so that they're able to engage with clubs and other some of the other activities that have gone on, for example, different competitions and things like that during the year.
Do parents need to sign their students up to return to the blended model?
At this point, they don't need to sign their students up. We will be, as Dana said, we'll be going through a process to get parents to make a commitment. For us, I believe that the default model is going to be that blended model, and then we'll need to determine, working with the feedback that we get from parents, whether the other option that we have available is distance learning or the hybrid model.
Yeah, I'd like to also answer another question that I'm seeing repeated in the chat room, and it's regarding why the rush to open schools. Again, every family's dynamic is different and the needs of families range. We're aware through our principals at each of our elementary sites that we have a large number of students in grades 6 and below who are home alone. There is no adult in the house to provide supervision or support in terms of breaks and nutrition. We have working parents who have had to make the decision to go to work to pay their bills. They don't have extended family, and if they do have extended family, their concern is putting those family members at risk. So the desire to, or the intent to bring students back to school who need to be there for supervisory reasons, including well-being, and making sure that their needs are being met, is something that we're placing at the forefront. Again, it doesn't mean that all students need to return. If your student has those things I just mentioned and is safe at home and feels supported at home, learning with the distance learning model, then that's excellent. But not all of our families and students are in that same situation. And so we're worried about a number of families and a number of students. And when I say a number, we're looking at roughly 15 to 20 students per site that are home alone. And that's troubling. It's troubling to us as educators, and I'm sure it's troubling to you as parents, regardless if that's a situation that you're having to encounter right now. But that's the sense of urgency for wanting to return as soon as safely possible.
Do you have any information on preschool students at this time?
So for preschool, our practice has been that we've aligned preschool to the TK through 6, and that would be our goal. We, though, are currently monitoring the information that's coming from the state with the state preschool and with Head Start with regard to the federal Head Start program. As soon as we are able to make final decisions on the ability of opening those programs, they're looking at somewhat of a different model just based on their own regulations for each of those programs, which are run separately and are different than the regulations that we have for TK through grade 6.
There still seems to be several questions on testing and whether students will need to be tested and whether the staff has to be tested following those guidelines.
So as far as students being tested, students would be tested after there was an indication that they had the illness, and we would recommend that testing. And then for our staff members, that's the same, as well as what's referred to as surveillance testing. And that has been the recommendation from CDPH, that we have adults tested who are asymptomatic, not showing any symptoms, but that they're tested on a regular basis, and that would be once every 2 months at this point. And we should say that all these regulations and guidelines are subject to change based on decisions made out of Sacramento, but then filter down to the counties.
If parents choose to wait to send their child to school, is the child's spot saved in a lottery school?
That's a great question. We really, in our district, have made an effort to do everything we can to support students and families throughout this difficult pandemic response. And so we've made the commitment for the 2020-21 school year to maintain those spaces for students in those programs. As we move to 2021-22, we'll have to reevaluate that. But currently, if we had a student whose family determined that distance learning or hybrid, whichever option is available, is preferable to them, we would save their student space until this next school year.
Will additional buses be deployed to meet the spacing guidelines?
We will deploy our full team of bus drivers, and our fleet of buses to meet the needs. If we consider currently that we will be, when we do come back with this blended learning model for TK-6, that we will not be using buses for 712 in the immediate future. That will free up a number of buses for us. We will be following all of the bus guidelines that are recommended by the state, which includes that students are spread as far apart as they can on the bus, that they are sanitizing their hands upon arrival and dismissal, and that we are sanitizing buses between uses.
I think we've talked about the fact that there's not going to be 3 different models offered. Can you explain again at what point the decision will be made as to what model will be offered?
Following the surveys that we are currently conducting, which get some basic feedback from parents, we will be then taking that information as we finalize our plan, and as we get closer to that date where we will be submitting the waiver, we then will also be submitting a final survey to parents to have them make that commitment as far as whether distance learning or hybrid learning is the model that they want. And then our goal is to move forward with the model which has the majority of parents interested in, thinking that's the best for their students and family.
One of the questions that I'm seeing repeated on here is in terms of the timeline. So if students are able to return and our waiver is approved and the data continues to decline in our county, what's the timeline? So the timeline at the very, very best, very soonest, I'm looking here at a calendar, just knowing what we know in terms of requirements for posting the waiver, submitting the waiver for approval at the local and the state level, it would be feasible to say that the earliest possible start date could be October 26th. I say could be because I see this question as well. A large part of this plan will require our employees to have input as we work to create a plan that they feel comfortable with as well, and that includes our certificated staff and our classified staff. So to commit right now with an absolute timeline would be difficult. Also not knowing the direction our board will elect to go upon our recommendation. But at this time, for those of you who are asking, when will students be allowed to return? They would be allowed to return TK-6 in the blended model no sooner, I'm confident to say that, than October 26th. We are aware that many neighboring districts similar in size to us are looking at early November as well.
While in-person instruction is going, is it possible to have a camera in the classroom where kids are going to be watching that lesson while they are at home on the opposite days?
That's a great question, and that is something that some of us have discussed, and we have come to the conclusion that the technological capability that we have currently and to be able to operate that across the district likely is not something that's possible at this time. You know, there are many different things that can be done with technology, but there are some limits to the resources that we have available, both as a school district, but then also as just in general trying to procure technology. There are many things that are difficult to purchase at this time because so many of us are dependent upon additional technology. So we want to put forth those, we want to put the learning in the best way possible in each of those different formats to help students to move forward with their grade level standards.
Margie, can I interject one thing? So I'm looking and I'm seeing that my comments stirred more comments. And the comment that I made that we have, roughly 15 to 20 students at our elementary schools who are home alone, that is not the basis for returning to school only. It's one of the very many reasons that we know kids belong in school. We've received a number of communications from parents who are currently working at home, who have the means to support their children with distance learning. That's not a struggle, but they've come to realize when I talk about mitigating learning loss, that isn't their greatest priority. Their greatest priority is my child is not interacting with children their age. They're getting tired of communicating strictly with adults. So the population of students and parents who wish their students to return in person extends beyond those that we're worried about home alone. I was giving an example of one population of students that we know would benefit tremendously by being back at school, supervised, and having their needs met. But again, there's a number of students, and we won't know that population until we conduct our survey. And like Heidi said, we ask for a commitment from our families, and we will require a commitment. It can't be where parents are haven't decided, because personnel and programmatically, we need to make sure that we have folks in place and programs formatted so that students either at home in distance learning or at school for in-person are having the absolute best experience that we can provide during this time.
All right, one more question since we're getting to 6:30 here.
Is it possible that a student may have a different teacher when we return to in-person learning than what they're currently have with distance learning?
So with distance learning, the goal is to return all of those teachers. I was thinking that perhaps that if a student had a hybrid teacher, there's more of a potential there that there could be a change. But our goal will be to have our students assigned to their current teacher. However, if there were a situation where a teacher had an underlying health condition or some other reason to not be able to return to in-person learning, then there potentially could be a change. And with that, I know there are additional questions. We'll work to see what we can do to answer those, and we try to put those together as far as in some categories. I do want to repeat though, our intentions to support our students in the Turlock Unified School District. We care about every one of them and want them to be successful. We recognize this is a very difficult time. As I said, when we began, many families are incredibly hopeful for students to return to school as soon as possible. And we know that many of you have grave concerns about your students returning anytime soon. That is why we are working through a process to develop options for families so that students may continue to learn at home if that's what their families think is best for them. And so it's not our intention to force families, but we do want to provide those opportunities when students can be returned to school safely to be able to return to in-person learning. We do believe that is the best approach for them, and our work will be to create a safe environment for students and staff during that time. And in the meantime, we'll continue with distance learning as our teachers are working very hard to support your children as they're learning on a daily basis. And that's all I have. And if Dana, if there's
You know what, I'm going to put one more comment out there. As a former secondary principal and a high school English teacher, I don't want anyone thinking that we have forgot about 7th through 12th graders. It troubles us terribly that those students are not having a secondary experience, particularly those upperclassmen where you get one shot at being a senior. And I did see a question related to, well, how come athletic conditioning is allowed but not classes? Well, the state and the county have given us some parameters that we can go by for outdoor conditioning. It doesn't allow for equipment. It requires social distancing. And if we could, you know, return 2,500 students onto a high school campus safely, keeping all of them socially distanced 6 feet all outside, we just don't have enough acreage on those campuses to be doing that. So we're starting small and we're giving students an opportunity to exercise and practice some physical fitness, because we know that's good for their hearts and their souls. But I don't want anyone thinking that we're not doing that work right now. Currently, as we're working on our TK-6 reopening plan and waiver, we're already beginning to think and brainstorm in terms of how that might look at the secondary level. Does that look, you know, is that a block schedule? Is alternating days as well? So we're doing that work in anticipation that following winter and flu season, that the spring may look a whole lot brighter for all of us. It's my goal, both as a superintendent and as a mom, that we're able to provide our senior students with some form of a senior experience. You know, we thought that last year seniors got the short end of the stick. Well, frankly, they got a better end of the stick right now than the direction this is going. And we need to make sure we're doing everything possible for our early learners and those students at the end of their educational career in TUSD, so they have memories they can take with them, and it's not something that's forgotten. So with that said, I'm through. Heidi, you're good?
good, thank you all very much for joining us.
Good night.